Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 601. We've got a great special guest for the show and a friend of the show. We've got Matt Medeiros joining us, the Director of Podcast and Success at Castos, and a well-loved and respected podcaster himself with the Matt Report. I've also got my co-host, Stephen. Stephen, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, my name's Steven Souter from zipfish.io. We make WordPress fast by optimizing the code that runs WordPress and the code that runs on the server.
And Matt, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure, Matt Medeiros, Director of Podcaster Success at Castos, avid WordPress podcaster, occasional product maker, marketing person, and business person.
And the main areas we're going to be covering in this podcast are going to be asking Matt about his move to Castos, about his latest plugin, Easy Support Videos, what have been some of the trends and memorable things that he's noticed in his most recent podcasts from the Matt Report. I've chosen 4 of my favourite. We're going to discuss that. And then probably in the bonus content, we're going to be discussing WordPress in general. The leadership, is Automatic going to go public soon? A load of WordPress stuff in the bonus content. Before I go into the main part of the interview, I just want to do my spot for Castos, who are my main sponsor, and I'm very thankful that they chose me to be one of their long-term sponsorships. I moved to Castos. I just really love it. One of the really great things I love about it is the simplicity of interface, yet it's still really easy to use. And what I mean by that is simplicity. A simple interface sometimes is not that easy to use. Where it comes to Castos, it is really easy to use. It's such great value, and they really helped me to move from my previous podcasting host. So if that sounds interesting, and it should for yourself or for clients, you really should look at podcasting to help you promote your business. Go over to Castos, have a look at what they've got to offer, and I suggest you sign up. So hopefully that was okay, Matt.
No pressure with the host.
No pressure with
the sponsor on the show.
I've been singing the praises of it quite effectively, I feel. I'll be doing my best. So I've got the time on. I'll put in the show notes, which I'm going to amend, that you've been with Castos for around about 18 months, but it's only actually been 10. I thought it was a great move. I was really happy for you. How's it been going? Has it been a bit of a surprise, or has it gone the way you thought it would go, Matt?
And Jonathan, you know this as much as anybody. I've been a podcaster for nearly a decade now, and I thought I knew everything about podcasting. I thought I knew about all the software, all the web hosts, all the podcast hosts that are out there, how people use podcasting, and that was a huge surprise to just learn how big the industry actually is, how not so dissimilar it is from WordPress. The cool kids at the cool lunch table is in WordPress world is here in podcasting, 10x, right? Because sometimes we're talking about celebrities, and that was just all really interesting to me. I really love the role. It's a reason why I made the transition is because it's a perfect fit for what I love to do, which is podcasting, content creation, sales, product, marketing. It's all of this stuff balled up into a day job. So, it feels great, and I've been happy so far.
Yeah, I'm really delighted for you. When I heard the move, I thought, my God, what a perfect job for Matt. It's the kind of dream job, really. Matt, podcasting, WordPress, all kind of mixed up together. It just was like it was made for you.
Yeah. It's one of the things that Craig, the founder of Castos, when he reached out to me, he kind of said that in and not those exact words, but almost those exact words. Like, I have a role I've made for you, and like, I would love for you to come along for it. So I was like, this is cool. This is great.
Right, it's fantastic. Over to my great Stephen.
What does somebody do? What does the day-to-day look like for a podcast success? It sounds like one of those like great titles that are just, I was listening to a podcast recently and somebody had the title of like director of tequila or something. Which is like, wow, that sounds like a fun job. But I feel like your title sounds like one of those fun jobs too. That's just like it's full of, I don't know, like going on people's podcasts and talking and meeting interesting people, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's dynamic stuff and there's static stuff. The static stuff is as a customer success person, right? When you're wearing that hat, you know, in a traditional software customer success role, it's helping people understand how to use the software, obviously how to be successful with the software. You know, are they meeting the goals that the software is actually being built to use? And it's a little bit of that, but the interface of podcast hosting, there's not, like, once you learn it once, there's not many moving parts. It's not like we're rolling out like Asana or Basecamp where it's like, hey, new feature, new way to do things, new workflows all the time. So the podcaster part of that success is, you know, of what it takes to actually be a podcaster. Like, if somebody who's just starting out and they have a million questions, 90% of them are all asking about the hardware, which is pointless in the success of podcasting and creating content. But that's where a lot of people start. So it's creating content. It's doing live streams. We do two weekly Zoom meetings or town halls. So that's like the static part of it. Like, these are the things I have to do to help people become successful. And then the dynamic part is, guest appearing on podcasts. I also run the YouTube channel there. So just pumping out as much YouTube content I can in the form of tutorials, in the form of industry stuff around podcasting. And that's like that. And then hosting the audience podcast, which is Castos' podcast. Yeah. So that dynamic part, as you both know, like when you're creating content, you know, sometimes it takes you an hour. Sometimes you waste 2 days and delete everything. Like I'm working on a new onboarding video right now for the plugin. And, you know, I'm in that creator mode where I'm 8 hours into editing like this 1 minute clip, and I'm like, I hate this thing right now. Like, I could just delete it, you know, which is what I did largely before I was paid to be a content creator. That's what I would do with my own stuff. You know, you waste time, you delete it, you throw it out, you start over again. That's the life of an artist, I guess.
For sure. Do you feel like there's like one or two things that makes a podcast successful? Like, if someone was going to start a podcast, like what are like the primary things that one focus on to be successful in that space? Or is it just vary so drastically between podcast to podcast and the audience that you're going after?
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, you know, as a host, if you're about to host your own podcast, you want to focus on, am I serving and providing value to the audience, which is the obvious answer. But that means that there's work involved there. So everyone says, yeah, you provide value to the audience. And the work isn't even really creating the content. It's actually talking to the audience and finding ways to connect with them. And I mean, you literally have to message people, ask people to give you feedback, DM them, get in a Facebook group, get in a live chat, and really get that feedback to make sure that people are super happy. And then second is your own satisfaction. For the podcast, are you doing this and is it feeling good? Because I think a lot of people start out and like episodes 1 through 10, super excited. You know, I'm interviewing people. This is great. I'm making cover art. You know, people are sharing my episodes and all that stuff. And then you run out of people after episode 10 to talk to, and you're like, what do I do now? And then it becomes a chore. And then you got people knocking on your door wanting to be on your podcast, and like all this stuff that becomes the burden or the work. And you got to make sure that the content that you're after is satisfying to you. Are you getting your opinions out? Are you getting your thoughts out? Is it resonating with the audience? And does it feel good to you? And then there's like the other success that you can, you know, measure and optimize for, you know, money, views, shares, like all that stuff. It's going to come later, and it's always going to change. Like that target's always going to move, but that internal creator, you have to be satisfied with that first. And you have to have a good following, whether it's a following of 10 people or 10,000 people. Like, you want to build that tribe.
Are there any metrics around like how long a podcast has to exist before it becomes successful? Because like in small business, everybody's like, oh, 3 years. Like most businesses fail within the first 3 years. If you make it past that point, you have like a much larger chance of succeeding over the long term.
You know, it was funny because somebody asked me that same exact question yesterday, and it's going to change for every podcast. But here's the thing. Yeah, podcast, like it's like planting a flag in the ground. When you say you're going to do a podcast, the only thing you have to do to convince other people that you are a successful podcaster is to not give up. You could have 0 listeners, right? You could have 0 audience. But the mere fact that at least the people in our space, in the tech space, and people who are savvy to podcasting, many of them know what the investment and what the challenge is to do a podcast, right? So what I found is the mere fact that you continue to do a podcast, people will recognize you and say, she's putting in the work, he's putting in the work. Mm-hmm. They know that you're doing it and that you haven't given up. And there's like this cognitive whatever, like there's this weight. They know it. They know that you're doing it. They might not listen to every episode, which is what obviously I found over the course of 8 years in the WordPress space. Yeah. It's a trend. It's a wave. People come in, people come out, new people, old people leave, people come back. But not giving up, people still say, oh, he's the guy that does a WordPress podcast. And even in my local market, when I launched, I have a local podcast that I do for where I live, south of Boston, southcoast.fm. It was like 2 weeks of me doing that podcast when it launched back in 2018, where like people were already like in my local co-working spaces, and when we were going to business events and stuff like that, they were like, "Oh, he's the guy doing that podcast." It's just like, you probably haven't even listened. You don't even know
but
about
they know,
it yet, right?
They know.
But there's just the mere fact. So long as you don't give up, it could be 10 episodes, 100 or 100 episodes. It doesn't matter. I think there's a weight to the fact that people know you're doing it.
That's great.
Just keep going.
I want to move on now. Let's talk about your new plugin, and then we'll probably go for our break. So it's called Easy Support Videos.
Yeah.
It's for the back end. It's for the admin. Much easier to explain what it does than Conductor, isn't it? Is that one of the things you learned from your Conductor still goes, and you were very generous giving me a lifetime license for that, and it's still going. But is that one of the things you learned from your experiences with Conductor? It's got to be easy to explain.
Yeah, when I started the agency back in end of 2007, going into 2008. I was like every other WordPress agency. Well, not every, but almost every. It was just like, hey, this client stuff, pretty tough. Let's do this product thing, which looks so easy, and everyone's printing money. So let's go after that. So, we went the route of WordPress themes. We were, fairly successful with that. And then we got into Conductor, like seeing what we were doing with themes, and then inevitably saying, wow, we should get into this plugin game too. And we're building a version of Conductor. And to shorten this story, what I learned really quick, well, not really quick, what took me a lot of pain and money and time to realize was it was too far ahead of its time. So Jonathan, I know you had experience with Conductor. Maybe some people listening have had it as well. We were trying to do like what Gutenberg's doing these days, a block, move it around and display content, like the stuff that Gutenberg is doing in like a obvious way today. And we'll have a query block inside of full site editing soon. That's what Conductor was. And I was trying to shoehorn that into what everyone was saying was the future of WordPress at that time, which was the customizer. Right. So it was just like, we're all going to the customizer. And I like turned to my team and I'm like, we're going to the customizer. Right. Let's build this thing. And we had a plugin called Note, where if you were in the customizer, just like you see with Gutenberg today, like if you're in a Gutenberg editor and you just hover over the places you can put a block, you see a line that lights up with a little dot on it. Like we built that. The plugin's still in the repo. I should probably expire it. I don't really know how to at this point. But you could do like that same UI, like we had built that in the customizer. And I know there's a lot of product owners out there who have been way too early to market, and this is the same feeling. Like anyone who's launched something too early knows exactly what I feel like and what I'm saying. Because back then I was like, well, we're going to the moon. And, when I first launched Conductor, we sold $5,000 of licenses in a day. And I literally remember being on that YouTube live stream that I was announcing it and already thinking to myself, like, what color Porsche am I going to get? Like, I just made $5,000 in an hour selling this product. I've hit it. And it slowly tailed off. It did fairly well, making a few $1,000 a month at its prime, but it was never enough for us to quit agency work and build out and build a product. It was too complicated. It was too early, and it was too much support. All of that is to say, I quickly, not quickly, but I realized over time that an ambitious product or a product with a lot of bells and whistles, there's a lot of overhead there that many of us forget to take account for. And the more simplistic a product is, the more aha moments you can give somebody with less code, the better chances you'll have. And we had launched easy support videos, I think like 3 years ago in the WordPress repo. People were just using it, sending us messages. I love this thing. I love this thing. This is great. I'd love to be able to embed more videos or put videos on like a custom, like speaking of advanced custom fields, I put it on my custom post types page to teach my customers how to use custom fields right inside of WordPress so they don't have to email me or call me or message me. And that's how we built easy support videos. So you can just embed videos inside of WordPress admin in a gallery page or on individual screens inside of WordPress. So a little video pops up that you make as a consultant, and it's better support, it's easier support. And it's a little bit of like, branding, a little bit of white glove. The customer feels a little bit more attached to you. So we're like everything else, we're testing it out, seeing how it's going. And we have a lot of great feedback, but it's low support. People get it. And there's not a lot of development support to it either. So like Conductor was an absolute nightmare. We were supporting themes, integrations, all this stuff. And forget explaining what the WordPress query is to people. Average customers, not even a chance, right? So,
well, to wrap up before we go for a break, mate. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Look at Alimator. I think they're up to. I think in your own podcast, you said they're up to 7 million. It's hard to go. Do you go? Try and be an Alimator, or do you? But on reflection, I think to reduce the risks, in some ways, it's better to go in with a product that's a bit better than the competition, but the competition have sown the seeds, if you know. Yeah. But then it's just a marketing challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, launching a product in any space is difficult. It doesn't matter if you're selling ice cream on the, down the street or if you're selling WordPress plugins. It's very difficult to get product market fit, to get awareness, and just to get all of the cylinders firing. And a lot of it, like you said, is going to come down to sales and marketing, messaging, positioning. And as a non-developer, Conductor was just too difficult for, or any code base or any complicated product is going to be too difficult to support and build out while trying to do all this other stuff. So it's just a super fine balance, unless you have a boatload of money, and you can just keep throwing it at it. But, we were trying to do the organic, bootstrapped balancing act, and I feel like, look, over the course of our themes in our plugin, our Conductor plugin, which was what, 6-7 years, something like that. I probably, we total collectively, we probably made $250,000 in digital sales over 6 or 7 years, right? So, I mean, it's, there are people who print $250,000 a month, with Elementor, right? Like there are people who print that kind of money monthly. But over
it's not bad though, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it still was just never enough to like what you're investing in, what you're doing, and to just
it's better than a kick in the bum, isn't it?
Yeah, it's better than absolutely nothing, right? So I feel like there's some success in that, or at least that's what I try to tell myself for reinforcement.
All right. We're going to go for our break. When we come back, we'll be delving a bit more about latest Matt Reports episodes. We were discussing where WordPress has been going. We've got a ton of stuff to discuss. We'll be back in a few moments. Coming back. I'm only under a little bit of pressure. The grandfather of WordPress podcasting, Matt, with us. Matt's such a great guy. I remember when I first started podcasting with my crazy co-host, Bill, Crazy Bill, who's still a friend actually, but as bonkers as ever.
He's on horseback somewhere with 6 shooters just running around.
Oh, God knows. You agreed to come on the show, and it was really bad. But I think you were my 3rd or 4th interview, and you just agreed to come on. And I'm always very appreciative of you agreeing to do that, Matt, because you definitely didn't need to do it. Before we go into our next question, I want to tell you about a webinar I'm doing with Spencer Forum. You all know Spencer. He's on my Roundtable show. We've been doing, this is our final webinar of a series of 3 that we've been doing about his product, Launch Flows, and also about how to combine it with a group of key plugins so you can build for your clients or for yourself really something comparable to ClickFunnels at about the 5th of the cost of something like ClickFunnels. It's going to be an amazing webinar. It's going to be about an hour or less. You'll be at the end of it around about the 40-minute mark. You'll be able to ask us questions or ask Spencer questions. And when are we doing this? We're doing this on Friday the 11th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. In all the episodes and all over the website, there's a link to the webinar. You go over to a page on Launchflow's website. You just give your name and email, and he just uses it to remind you a day before the webinar that it's coming up, and you'll be able to join us and ask questions. It should be a blast. So the Matt report, I think, some of the things, like I say, I think a couple of the topics that seemed to come through it was headless WordPress and RESTless API. I think some of the shows that stuck in my memory recently was defining a chief operating officer. That was with Lisa Wilson. I thought that was an excellent episode. WP Crafts QL, Jason Bailey. I had to listen to that about 3 times. Talk about rich in content. Wow, but really fantastic guy and really knows his stuff. And if you really want to get some understanding about, I just loved it because it really showed some of the reasons why I still get excited about WordPress, because all these possibilities, isn't there, Matt? Another one, Knife and Wiggly, and Paul Lacey. I know Paul. He's coming on the Roundtable show. He's a great guy. I really thought that was interesting. How do you build a podcast? How do you monetize it? And obviously Nathan now is the public face of not WP Tavern, the podcast, WordPress Tavern. Good luck to him. And I think the last one, I'm a bit biased because you interviewed Brian Jackson, and Brian's a friend of mine, and he regularly comes on the Roundtable show. I personally think Brian is one of the brightest people in WordPress. He's so unassuming, but he's a bit of a monster. What do you think about some of the podcasts I've chosen? Do you think, are they some of the ones that stick in your mind as well?
Well, I've noticed that you didn't really choose any of the no-code, low-code episodes that I did. One of the things I'm trying to do is, which I'm sure a lot of, there's yours included, there's a ton of WordPress podcasts that are out there. And when at the top of the show, we were talking about like what makes a show successful. And I say part of that is satisfying yourself as a content creator. And what I'm trying to do is like, I've seen what WordPress has done, obviously as a user for the last 12, 15 years, and then as a podcast host over the last 8 to 9. And I've seen what people have done in terms of like excitement, like what has really made people excited about WordPress. And, you know, back in the day, it was just the mere fact that there was all these themes that you could quickly install. And then the rise and fall of like Theme Forest and like Code Canyon and like what people were doing with it. And then page builders came along, like that same excitement. And really it is all boiling down to enabling and empowering somebody to build something without any real coding development. And let's be honest here, I think the content that still does the best in the WordPress ecosystem is developer focused, because that's how many people, that's like, if you look at any top like WordPress news site, it's the ones that always get the most votes is like, you know, I don't know, how to tab space your functions PHP files. It's like, why? This is what's winning, right? So, okay, that's fine. And then there's the end user tutorials, because I have the Plugin Tut YouTube channel, which I've, you know, sorely neglected since I started Castos because I'm so busy, but that kind of how to use something is super popular. The business, the marketing, even like the community focused content, unless it's coming from .org, is not, you just don't have that. Yeah, but
I know what you're going to say, because I think, I'm saying that's the stuff you're really and that's the stuff I'm really interested in as well.
Right.
But it's not the most popular, is it?
Right. Like you're already, like you look at WordPress on a global scale, and as big and as popular as it is on the internet, there's only like 1% of people who actually care about it. And the majority of that tiny fraction are largely developers, right? And then there's like the business people in it. And then that shrinks even more. So this doesn't really answer your question of like what my favorite shows are, but what I've been trying to do is look at what and how and why WordPress was so exciting for a lot of people. And then look at other markets like no code and say, look how excited people are to use this platform called Bubble. They're building businesses just like people were with WordPress. It's powerful software. It's empowering them to do things that they can't really do, nor have the time to do or the money to do, just like page builders and even like theming WordPress was ACF, Genesis and all this stuff, like all of that same thing. So I am foolishly trying to combine the two worlds, because I think there can be crossover, right? I think that there's an agency or a WordPress freelancer out there who stops looking at WordPress as like the entry level solution and be like, you know what? This takes time, planning, money, management, support. We're going to elevate WordPress up here. And maybe somebody coming in who doesn't have a budget and I need to do this fast, let me go to Webflow. Let me bring Webflow into my toolkit, you know, or another piece of software, right? Or they want to get into like app development. And instead of looking at WordPress as the hammer and let's go after all the nails with WordPress, well, maybe if you're going to build a traditional web app for somebody, maybe WordPress isn't the answer. It's Bubble, right? And then I'm also doing SaaS, right? SaaS, software as a service. So people like Brian Castle and, you know, a bunch of other folks who, there is WordPress crossover there, because a lot of people use WordPress as a springboard to SaaS or your traditional SaaS, but just trying to cover all the bases these days, you know, with the Matt Report to try to broaden, you know, the awareness.
And that's what I've been trying to do. I'm not sure how successful it'll be, but
yeah, I mean, I think that's what everyone, you know, has to do. And for me, like new branding, constantly like always evolving the brand. I try not to leave it stagnant. And, you know, I launched the WP Minute podcast, and that's for me to be like, look, this will 100% be WordPress all the time. Like this, it's the WP Minute. So you're not going to cover anything else. And that's to keep people connected to WordPress. And that's my strategy through 2021.
I thought, you know, the interview with Lisa Wilson, you know, like it came across, she was so honest with you about all the balls that she's juggling, you know. Like you said to her, like 3 years ago, it sounded like they were having a tough time competing with Adobe. That's died down. I got the impression what she was saying, that's died down a bit, but Adobe were really gunning for them, and some of the other large agencies like 10up and that. I was hearing that because of that they were pitching for other jobs that they normally wouldn't. So that was having consequences for the tier 2 WordPress agencies, because the bigger agencies were encroaching. So it was tumbling downwards, really. But I think that's plateaued to some extent. What, do you think I'm right about that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, when you're the size of a web dev or the size of a 10-up, it's a competitive scene, right? It is no doubt about it. I've known Lisa and Brad for a long time. Obviously, consider them, close friends. We talk often. So yeah, I mean, she's super smart. I think there's, again, like when we talk about like products, people think, you just, like I did, you launch a product, buy a Porsche, right? That's what everyone does. And then you realize that, there's so much other overhead that goes into this stuff. Same thing with agency life. Like if you really truly want to scale an agency, to that size, there's stuff you have to think about, and a chief operating officer is certainly one of them. And it's somebody who oversees the operations of everything. And you have to have somebody as sharp and as experienced as Lisa to understand sales, marketing, development, branding, messaging, client services, support, like hiring, HR. Like it's a massive role, right? A COO, and it's just it's a tough game when it's that competitive. It's another episode that just came to mind. I'm gonna forget the guy's name, but if you just search on my site, Barrel Agency, like roll a barrel down a hill, Barrel Agency. He uses WordPress, but they're a New York based agency. It's a small-ish shop. I want to say maybe like 20, 25 people. But that was a fantastic, episode as well. And by far one of my favorite episodes was years ago with a good friend of mine, Jose Caballero. He worked for Razorfish, which was a massive agency, many years ago. And it was just a fantastic conversation. He runs something called the School, he did something called the School, SKOOL. And he was talking about selling 6-figure contracts to customers because that's what he was doing at Razorfish. I mean, that 6 figures was just entry level, right, for a lot of those people. And I remember the title of that show was How to Charge. This is when I was a young podcaster, content creator. It was like, the title was How to Charge Your Clients $100,000 per project. And, I guess back then my SEO was good. In like a couple weeks, anyone searching for him to hire him as a creative director was finding my podcast episode with him. And he was like, hey man, can you change that title? Because people are reaching out to me to do work and they think I'm going to screw them by just simply charging them $100,000. He's like, can you change that title? I'm like, yeah, no problem. That is also a fantastic episode. He's a great guy.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're going to wrap up the podcast, the show, but Matt's agreed to stay on for our bonus content. In the bonus content, I'm going to let Stephen have a question. But no, it's just giving a lot of air to Matt. And we're going to be discussing how WordPress in general is doing, Automatic. There's just a load of stuff. I'm going to give some of my opinions so I can kill myself. It should be great. So join us and you'll be able to watch the bonus and the whole interview on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. So, Stephen, what's the best way for people to get hold of you, Stephen?
Head over to zipfish.io, run a speed test, see how much faster your website can be.
Yeah, and Stephen's really helped with the WP-Tonic website, made it more of a speed machine, not a laggard. Thank you for that. Great team. Matt, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and what you are up to, Matt?
Day job, Castos.com if you want to start a podcast. Matt Report if you're interested in my podcast. But everything I do is craftedbymatt.com. It's absolutely everything I do.
That's great. So remember, if you want to listen to the bonus content, go over to the YouTube channel. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So on to bonus content. So Matt, so I'm a bit frustrated. It's like an old gramophone record. I think we're into our third year of Gutenberg, bless its little heart, are, I'm a bit frustrated with that, but that's old records. So first of all, do you think that Automatic are probably going to go public this year?
Oh man, I don't know about this year. I'd say I doubt this year. I'd say that we'd really have to see something for their own benefit. But I mean, God, they're already worth billions of dollars, so it probably doesn't matter. But in my head, I'd say they'd probably need to make a big splash with WooCommerce first before they make that mark, because I think a lot of people will just draw parallels between them and Shopify. The website stuff, Squarespace just, and even Matt sort of with his blessing announced their sort of filing Squarespace. And I don't think that's as sexy as somebody coming on the scene and being like, hey, look, an alternative to Shopify, and make the rounds of the big news outlets.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Over to you, Stephen.
I kind of want to dive into this whole low code, no code WordPress kind of convergence, because as WordPress keeps getting built out, as Gutenberg gets more and more developed, right? Like the core of WordPress itself is embracing more and more of this low code, no code idea. I mean, we talk about the query block, right? Like that's a step in that direction. But there's all these other platforms also, like you mentioned, Bubbles. I feel like everywhere these days, people talking about it, or at least they're running their ads everywhere. Do you think WordPress has is competitive in that environment, but it wasn't set up to be a low code, no code sort of thing from you required, plugins and add-ons, but WordPress has been going that more, organically with Gutenberg. Just what's your perception of that whole kind of area? And as people are moving that direction?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at just WordPress competition, whether it's website building, Bubble, Shopify, Webflow, Adobe, this is a massive battleship that we are sitting on right now. There's just the sheer size. The competition would do whatever they could to get 10% of WordPress adoption rate. I think WordPress, this is why the job is so difficult, right? This is why the job is so difficult, not only for Matt, but for people who contribute and actually build the software. This is a huge piece of software for a lot of people. And if you just put Gutenberg into the spotlight for a moment, what I found funny as a non-developer, I shouldn't say non-technical because I'm fairly technical, but as a non-developer, I thought it was kind of comical that so many developers hated on Gutenberg, in its beta form, in its first version, because it's hey man, we're all you've built software. You know what a version 0.1 looks like, and in 2 years you're on version 3 and it's just way better. Why is everybody flipping their lids over this stuff? From that perspective. So I think WordPress has just fallen into this place where it's so widely used. And I would even argue that no code, low code, let's just say use the term low code. I mean, WordPress was that since I was in it, right? I mean, I remember buying the first premium theme I ever bought was the standard theme made by John, made by the 8-bit. I forget what the name of their Tom McFarlane, John Saddington, all those dudes. This is years and years ago. One would argue that that's low code already. The site is already built for me. I hit install and activate, and then slowly progress in the Studio Press back to low code. What were you doing? Well, what was I doing? I was just copying snippets and dropping it into, I can copy paste. I can find a file through FTP and I can paste it in. That's low code to me. WordPress has been like that forever. Page builders now that's where you're really set to compete. Elementor versus Webflow, the stuff that's going on over there. It's quite exciting. And yeah, if you can do something like a Bubble on your own server, that's phenomenal. And the reason why I built Conductor back in the day is, and Matt still says this today, he's getting more vocal with it now. He dipped for a little while, is calling WordPress the operating system of the web. And that has when I heard that, I was like, okay, this is going to go far beyond pages and posts. And I want to be in this. I want to be in WordPress. I mean, it's taken a decade to still like really see that, but Gutenberg is going to do a lot of crazy stuff. And I think that, we'll get closer to that bubble-esque experience with it.
Yeah. What do you think the difference is like now versus back in the days of like Dreamweaver and all of those other like WYSIWYG website, low code, no code builders? It seems like they were really hot for a hot second and then everybody hated on them for a while. And now we're kind of back into this place where everybody's getting super amped. Is the technology just that much better? Or is it one of those things that people are going to try to build all this stuff and like it's not going to work out and everyone's going to hate on it again?
Yeah, there's a friend of the Tonic show, Chris Badgett, and whenever I try to figure out who a famous person or theory is, he knows because he's really much smarter than I. But there's that theory of how things in the tech go up and down, up and down. It's like really small monitors, big monitors, back to small monitors. It's just like 5,000 gigahertz, and then it's like, well, now multi-core with 1,000 gigahertz. And it's just like all this stuff. I think, technology, the evolution of it all is the browser has been more powerful. PCs are more powerful. You can do things in the cloud so much better, so that's why we're going to see this stuff. I think what the battle really is and why people chose those programs back in the day, whether it was Front Page or Dreamweaver, was largely the experience. At the end of the day, somebody's building out a website. And this is the same battleground that WordPress sees itself on today. I say WordPress sort of loosely because I'm also talking about Automatic, WordPress.com, and WordPress.org, is that experience. Like what they do, how people use WordPress versus how people use Elementor and never even like think about WordPress because they're only using Elementor. And we see this with Elementor Cloud coming. It's all about that experience. We see people like Liquid Web and all these other hosts building out their own solutions, GoDaddy, and I think what Matt wants to make sure doesn't happen is that the W doesn't get lost in all of this stuff. So I think he'll do whatever he can to make sure that even if GoDaddy flips it around, the totally new experience, somewhere the user identifies the W underneath. And I think tinfoil hat moment is, I think that's what Gutenberg really is that the Gutenberg experience, the person will, like, I don't think anyone's ever going to rewrite the Gutenberg experience. They might rewrite everything else around it, right? UI and that thing. But I think the Gutenberg experience will be the same because there's way too much overhead. And I think that's where Matt wins in the long game, because he's going to say, shit, no hosting company's going to rewrite that. Like that will be WordPress in 5 years. That editing screen will be WordPress in 5 years. I'm air quoting for people who are not watching. Like that will be the W mark. You'll be in Gutenberg, and you might be in Gutenberg on your freaking refrigerator. That's how crazy I think like Gutenberg could be portable in the future. Your Samsung touchscreen refrigerator to build out a to-do list might be powered by Gutenberg in the future, just like a lot of these devices have the Linux kernel in them. Yeah. That's the way that I see it.
Lovely.
And we'll just delete this episode.
Yeah, there you go. So the hosting companies, they're Liquid Web, old Chris. Love you, Chris. You can buy my stuff anytime.
Is your podcast for sale?
No. I've been flippant there. But, all the main hosting companies seem to be buying up plugins. You've remarked about that on your own podcast. So what's the plan? Are they just going to bundle them and offer them with their hosting at basically say, you get all these plugins free if you use our hosting? Is that the plan? Is it?
I would imagine so. I would imagine that you're not charging, or it's just built into the monthly hosting price. Like, get all these plugins for $49 a month, or don't get these plugins for $29 a month. And, I'd imagine they're going to be installed as a must-use plugin, so the person can't just take them with them onto the next WordPress hosting if they decide to even move WordPress hosting at that point. And these folks like Chris and these big hosting companies, as somebody who was at a big host prior to this, it's a lot of smart people there, and you're going to see the same challenges. Like, let's not forget, Automatic is 11, I think the last time Matt said 1,100 people, 1,200, 1,400 people, whatever. It's over 1,000 people. Imagine having 1,000 people working for you, and you still don't have a hosted WooCommerce product yet. And I'm not saying that to bash them. What I'm saying is it's a lot of freaking work. And I think a lot of people forget about that. So I think this is going to be slower than I had originally anticipated. But, you start with an onboarding wizard. You start with that onboarding flow. GoDaddy does this really well, where you're going through an onboarding flow, but you're really inside WordPress and you don't really know it yet. Or at least, even if it's outside of WordPress, it triggers WordPress to install a bunch of stuff you selected. Like, they start with that, and then they really start to, bake in. And I think if a lot of them should be smart to wait for Gutenberg and full site editing to mature, because they would have to rip things down and build it back up again if they were really trying to take over the admin. But it's going to come down to that experience, but it's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, that's how I don't see them. Well, it'd be wise not to, where they say you can't have access to this plugin unless you use our hosting because it's open source. Somebody straight away would just fork it and sell it, wouldn't they? So I don't think that's a possibility. On to the themes and plugins. We've had recently, I forgot the name of the plugin, but we discussed it on my roundtable show, a plugin that was bought recently, and then they changed it completely and upset a lot of people with the
user profile.
Yeah. And then we've had all this going on with the themes, and I forgot the lady that worked for Automatic that had to take terrible abuse for doing her job. Do you think this seems to be a continuing trend? Do you think because of this that some of the things that you've been asking for and what I think they should do might actually see some light? Because this plugin was a perfect example. It could have been a lot worse. The person could have bought it and on the quiet injected a load of spammy code, couldn't he? It's not great, is it?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is it's so hard for a lot of folks in the WordPress. There's people in the WordPress community because they love open source and they despise, commercial endeavors in WordPress. There's people that only care about commercial endeavors and they don't care about open source or people who contribute or volunteer. It's a human problem that we really run into at this size. I don't have any. I did a written interview with the gentleman who acquired the plugin, and look, this is a guy. I'm torn here, and these are difficult human problems. You have a gentleman who acquires this plugin. Okay, he has commercial aspirations, don't we all? Almost. Yeah. And he was also a core contributor. So it's like, and then you get all these people who are WordPress developers who are just trashing him. It's like, okay, so he made a mistake. He thought, maybe he didn't even maybe he did it consciously knowing you have to sit down as a business owner and say, how am I going to make this thing survive? I just bought it. And there could be a general feedback where people are like, I want these features. He told me that he was getting people telling him that they wanted these features. So he built it and he used it as a springboard. There are plenty of companies out there whom I'm friends with who have large plugin companies that do this all the time, that do what's the word I'm looking for? Like unsatisfying or distasteful things.
We've
like
got to make it clear here. The original, he took over. So you're saying the original functionality still did the job. He added additional functionality.
I mean, I've never used the original plugin, as a business person, you're looking for an investment, you walk in, you say, this simple plugin has 400,000 active installs. I'm going to acquire it probably for a small amount of dollars for what it does now. And because it user profiles touches memberships, I'm going to release a membership plugin with it. Or maybe not a full-on membership plugin, but something closer to it. I can't fault him for that.
No, not really.
From a business perspective.
No.
He could have communicated it better.
Yeah.
He could have let people know. He could have had the light version versus the pro version. But I look at the open reaction to this, and it's like, man, he's way smarter than me. He's contributed to WordPress. He's done more for WordPress by committing code to the WordPress software than I ever have. And I'm sure even a lot of people complaining about him. So it's just like, this guy, was a superhero one day, and now he's the villain because he's going after this monetization way. Yeah, could have been better, but this is the game we live in.
When you put it into focus, he was made out to be the reaper of death, wasn't he?
Right. Right.
Poor sod, really. I think the theme thing about, I forgot the lady's name that got all the abuse. What was
Mika
her name?
Epstein.
I think that was worse, really. That was pretty horrible, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, my thing on that too is money doesn't solve everything, but money could solve some of this blowback.
And she's such a nice lady, isn't
right,
she?
Right. And there's if there was no volunteers and there were paid people on that, on the .org and on the theme team and the plugin team, there could be levels of installation and communication that wouldn't allow somebody to go directly after somebody online, threatening them and all this other, BS that happens. And there's a lot of money, and I talked about this with Matt Mullenweg on my podcast. There's a lot of money that flows through .org. If it were a theme shop, a theme marketplace or a plugin marketplace proper, as a business owner, I would tax me. This is how economies work. Just tax me on this stuff, and there'll be rules, there'll be guidelines, there'll be support, there'll be infrastructure around this. You tax me, I have a way to make money, and so that volunteers, number one, wouldn't have to bear the brunt of humanity and what is being confused with like a commercial, endeavor. And it doesn't solve it. Idiots will still attack people, but at least there could be somebody there to shut them off, or people are a little bit more anonymous who kind of work in that environment. But that's never gonna happen. It's unfortunate, right? The people that volunteer tons of time and have to go through this, but also people who get tons of time who just never really, make it up to the ranks or spotlight or like something that allows them. We just saw the announcement of WordPress turning 18, and Mike Little wasn't even on the illustrated timeline. It's just like, Jesus, like what's going on? Like, I don't think that was vindictive. It just gets lost.
Hopefully Stephen won't be. We're getting on to the last 5 minutes because I know you're busy. Let's go on to the great leader, Matt Mullenweg. And his leadership. Now, I'm going to put this to you. I think as a founder with Little, I think they did something really, really great. And I think through WordPress, they have provided work for you, me, for hundreds of thousands of people. And that can't be ever taken away from Matt. And as a founder and as an inspiration, I think he's a great man. Unfortunately, as a lead of Automatic, I don't think he's up to the job, basically. And some of his announcements and I've found quite odd, to be quite truthful with you. That's my position. I wish him well, and I think his place in history will always be there. but I think he would be wise to maybe look at his position as CEO of Automatic. Well, what's your thoughts, Matt? Or are you staying away from this completely, Matt? Allow me to.
No, I mean, look, tons of respect. I wouldn't want the position unless I looked at the bank account and I was like, okay, I'll do it. But like I can't. When I interviewed him, I just told him flat out, I think you do too much. I think part of the issue and like largely some of the optics, the bad optics that happen, is because you're doing too much, and there's that true benevolent dictator, which he's like jokingly, openly talked about, is
it didn't go down well with me, really, man.
No. I mean, it shouldn't go down well with too many people. Here's the thing: it's hard to say he is not the right leader because it's only going to take the next leader to come in and be like, wow, this person is terrible, and like, please, can we have Matt back? And that might be a thing in the future, because if you look at it from, let's say they did go, like, I don't think he would be somebody who was a CEO through an IPO. I don't think he would want to do that. I look at Matt as a defender of open source and WordPress. And I think he's trying to outsmart the commercial interest in all of this. Maybe not. Maybe he's getting older and he's just like, screw it, I just want to cash out. And that could totally be a thing. But I think
I'm not resentful for
right.
him. Good luck to him,
right,
as far as I'm concerned.
Right. So I think he's trying to defend not only the software, but the commercial interests that come into this, including investments and going IPO and all this stuff. I mean, the amount of people that must knock on his door to invest now is probably insane, of what he gets offered. So that's all going to come at when I say our expense, I mean the blue collar digital worker, the person who's a service provider, a small plugin maker. Like, we're the ones that are going to get lost because he has to put up all of these moats to defend it. Jetpack being one of them, and how that will eat up small plugin makers, which I think he said something like it's market correction. Like, if he has a form plugin in there, you're going to lose a bunch of other small-time form plugins. One would say, hey, that's okay, but you're also losing out. You're shrinking people who could have nice little jobs as a blue collar digital worker. So, I guess what I'm getting at is I think he's trying to outsmart it. I don't know. Like, if you looked at popular open source companies that are commercially driven, I don't know, Red Hat, Oracle, like, you're going to need a CEO that runs it like that. And what does that mean? That means there'll be commercial WordPress, WordPress.com, and WordPress download. Here's what it'll be renamed to. If you ever had somebody come in to run it like a traditional commercial business, you'd have WordPress.com and you'd have downloadable WordPress with Jetpack. Like, that would be the title, or like WordPress powered by Jetpack, and you would download that and Jetpack would be in there and you couldn't peel it out, right? Because your auto updates are just going to slap that sucker right back into your code. And then somewhere in the little tiny fine print is open source WordPress that you can download, and they'd probably cut out all the community stuff. WordCamps would die. WordPress meetups wouldn't be funded anymore. There'd be all this stuff because a commercially driven, from what I've seen, a commercially driven open source company is just like, we do this big commercial thing over here, and oh, by the way, you can go download the free version way over there.
It could be
with some documents.
But I would hope that maybe Matt would be, the chairman of he is. I don't know what his title is of the foundation, but I would want him to be strongly involved in the foundation side of it for that purpose. But just one quick last question. It's a cheeky question, but if they had asked you to be the host of WP Tavern podcast, would you have done it, Matt?
No.
No.
Nope. No. My job at, like, I love what I'm doing.
Would your ego would have liked them to ask you?
No.
No.
No,
I knew they weren't going to ask me. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not the most popular person at the tavern. They
Yeah.
get rid of my posts, Matt.
Yeah.
They remove them actually.
Yeah. I don't really know what the tavern is these days. Like, I'd love it to be a little bit more serious, with some more serious backing from.
Well, it's a difficult situation because Tavlot, I love him dearly. A great community WordPress member, and I have much respect for him. But I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to be dishonest. How to put this honestly, but not too brutal. It's not been great. I'm sorry. His editorship of the tavern, I feel. But maybe he was told that this is the road we want to go down. This is the style we want. Maybe he hasn't got, and maybe that's why. And I'm terrible at names. The previous guy,
Jeff Chandler.
Yeah, Jeff. Jeff was just a fantastic guy, wasn't he? But I think there were reasons why he left, wasn't there?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for more insights into how WP Jukebox Podcast is operating, I did a short interview with Nathan.
Yes,
on the podcast, and I think it's largely an experiment for them, right now, and I think one of the biggest issues with WordPress is. And again, .org and .com and Automatic all bundled into one, is the marketing, the messaging. And when I say I don't really know what's happening with Tavern right now, like, I love all the work that Sarah Gooding does. Mm-hmm. I think she's phenomenal. I think as a journalist.
She's a beast, isn't she?
Right.
She's a beast.
Just amazing stuff. But what I would like to see, again, asking more of Matt, is more investment in that space and, making it a more proper, news outlet. One that really justifies the presence of WordPress, right?
Well, I think we've got to wrap it up.
Hey, it was a pleasure talking to you today, Stephen. I mean, you and I, we covered a lot of ground.
It's been fun.
I'm sorry about that, Steve. But Steve, I'll give a fair bit of time to Steve as well. I think. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's much appreciated. Hopefully you'll be back on the Roundtable show in the next couple of months, and you have to come back for the interview show. A great member of the WordPress community. I just want to thank you personally for everything you've done in WordPress. I've learned a lot from your example and your honest, independent opinions and insights. I just want to say thank you so much for continuing being such a great podcaster.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we'll be back next week with another great guest and another great show. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.